Energy prices in Germany are roughly 10 times what they were just 2 years ago, and industry is crumbling. German-based production has already declined by 2.5%, and it's projected that it will decline by another 5% in 2023. But those are conservative estimates. Most likely, by this time next year, German-based production will have declined by at least 10% to 15%. Companies are either going bankrupt, going insolvent, or shifting their production out of Germany. And it's not just manufacturing. At least 15,000 retail stores in Germany are facing bankruptcy. The entire sector is struggling to survive under the combined burden of high energy prices, inflation, and plummeting consumer sentiment as individual families' real incomes are being battered by the same economic crises that are crippling industry. And retail gas prices in Germany are set to increase by a third starting in December. Now, all of this, combined with the rampant suspicion that the U.S. was behind the explosions that disabled the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines last month, has led to a significant rise in anti-American, anti-EU sentiment across Germany, with many calling for Germany to break with the U.S. and to start putting their national interests above the agenda of the EU. Now, if you've been following my channel since at least the beginning of the war in Ukraine, then you'll know that this is not only something that I expected, but I suggest that this is precisely the goal of the U.S. proxy war against Europe, to cripple Germany, separate it from the EU, and accelerate the deindustrialization of Europe. The war in Ukraine is just a vehicle for pursuing these goals, and that project is advancing at pace. But let me reiterate again what I mean when I say, for example, a U.S. proxy war against Europe. I'm not talking about the U.S. per se. I'm talking about America's economic, political, and military power being used as an instrument by the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. And this is a class of people who float above nationalities. You have to know that the elites of any nation or of every nation constitute their own nation, separate and distinct and apart from their countrymen. That's why you can have someone like Wolfgang Schäuble scolding the German people for whining about high energy prices and telling them, just burn candles at home and wear 2 sweaters if you're cold. And it's why you can have Liz Truss, the current Prime Minister of the UK, meeting with hedge fund managers the day before she announces her budget, and those hedge fund managers then being able to make millions and millions of dollars by shorting the British pound the moment she announces her plan to destroy the British economy. The owners and controllers of global financialized capital have captured the governments of the Western world. The United States just happens to be the most powerful weapon that they have with which to advance their agenda, but that agenda is by no means in the interests of the American people or the American nation. It is for the sake of their own nation, the nation of elites, and that is a nation that has no nationality. Empire today is not state-based, it's state-assisted, but it is an empire of capital. Because look, when, for example, Saudi Arabia and OPEC cut oil production last month, that was a blow to the US and to Europe, but it was not a blow to the owners and controllers of capital. BlackRock, for instance, the largest asset management firm in the world, owns significant shares of Aramco, and they even have the controlling share in an Aramco subsidiary. So Mohammed bin Salman outsmarted Joe Biden, but he didn't outsmart Larry Fink. And that's what needs to start happening. See, we need to understand this. This needs to be clear in everyone's mind. When we're talking about the unipolar world, or we're talking about global hegemony, the reality is that this only applies to private sector power. Now, the destabilization of Europe, the apparent decline of the West, is something that many across the Muslim world and the global South generally will welcome, because we've been suffering from Western oppression for decades and decades and decades. But to welcome it is a misreading of what's happening, because the economic crises that are plaguing Europe and America are something that is being imposed upon them by a coalition of private sector power that surpasses the power of states and subordinates states. It is the unipolar power in the world today. And just because they are choosing to throw Western populations under the bus, that does not mean for a moment that they're going to leave us alone. The decline of the West does not benefit us. Just because the same powers that have been attacking us for decades are attacking them now, that doesn't help us. Those powers are still intact, and they will continue to prey upon us the same as they always have unless we resist them. Know that the destruction of small and medium-sized enterprises in the West, in Europe, in America, and the deluge of bankruptcies that will inevitably occur in the next few months just constitutes power consolidation, a process that advances monopolization by the biggest players.